Greetings, this is M squared, and we are going to talk about additive inverses and multiplicative inverses. So I just want to remind you what those are. An additive inverse is whatever I add to a number to get 0, which means I basically just change the sign. If I have 5, what do I have to add to get 0? I have to add a -5. If I had a -3, I'd have to add a +3. So basically what you have to do is change the sign on whatever you're given to find its additive inverse. A multiplicative inverse is whatever I would multiply by to get a 1. And so in that case, we just flip it, because 2/3 times 3/2 is 1. They cancel. So basically, when it's asked to find the additive inverse, you change the sign, the positive or negative. And when it asks to find the multiplicative inverse, you flip it. And this gets a little tricky depending on what form you're given. So, additive inverse. Let's just do a bunch of additive inverses first. All we have to do is change the sign. 5, because -5 plus 5 is 0. -2/3, I just switch the sign, because 2/3 plus -2/3 is 0. So basically, that's the easy one. You just change the sign. That's all you do, because then that's how you would get 0. So multiplicative inverse, we got to flip it, flip the fraction, turn it over. It's called also the reciprocal. So if I started with -5, the sign stays the same for the multiplicative inverse, because I want to get a +1, and a negative will get me a positive. And then I flip the fraction. Remember, there's like a 1 underneath every integer, so we just simply flip it over and get 1/5. And you can check that in your calculator. You can say 1/5, you get a little fraction key there, that's 1/5, times 5, and you'll get a 1. And we know that the negative and the negative get us a positive too. So we're going to flip it. So we just flip 2/3 over, we get 3/2. Now when you get a decimal, it's a little bit trickier. It's much easier. You can't just flip a decimal. You can't say 1 over 0.75. We don't write numbers that way. So we'd have to make it a fraction first. So if you didn't know that that was 3/4, which you probably should know some of those, like 0.25 is 1/4, 0.5 is a half, 0.75 is kind of the money thing. But if you didn't know that was 3/4, then you write it like you would say it. If you don't say 0.75 and you say it correctly, you say 75 hundredths. Remember, that's the tenths place, that's the hundredths. Then you could write 75 hundredths. And then you could flip that and reduce it. Or you could reduce it and then flip it. It doesn't really matter. But if I reduce this fraction, 25 goes into there 3 times, 25 goes into there 4 times. And then once I have a reduced fraction, I can flip the fraction over to find my multiplicative inverse. So that's how you would do decimals. They probably won't give you any repeating decimals, because that's kind of a little bit more work to change a repeating decimal to a fraction. So hopefully they won't do that. That's a different lesson. Okay, so we're flipping it. We can't flip 3.5. We can't say 1 over 3.5. So we have to change it to an improper fraction first. So if you remember that, you take the denominator, multiply it by the whole number, and then add this. The denominator would stay the same. So 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. So this becomes -7/2. And now, since it's an improper fraction, I can flip it over and get -2 over 7, and that's my multiplicative inverse of 3.5. I put a 15 there. Sorry, that is not a 15. That should have been a square root of 5. Okay, so when I flip this, I get -1 over the square root of 5. Now, I don't know if you've learned how to simplify radicals yet. If you have, and they asked you to rationalize the denominator or make sure that there's no square roots in the denominator, you would do that. This is a perfectly good answer. But if the teacher asked that, maybe on a final exam, because you maybe haven't gone over that at this point in the year, then what you would do is, to rationalize the denominators, we multiply by the number 1, but a very specific number 1. This is the number 1 because anytime you divide something by itself, you get a 1. And we do that to get rid of the square roots in the bottom. 1 times the square root of 5 is the square root of 5. The square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is the square root of 25, which is 5. And so this also works. This is an acceptable answer, that's an acceptable answer. So you have to ask your teacher or read the directions in the book to see which one they want. And that's how you do additive inverses and multiplicative inverses. Good luck with that. This is M squared signing out.